Hey, what's up? I'm Kite0080 from Music's the Hang Up. In this episode, we're hanging out with Kira Yoshi. We're going to be talking about his thoughts on Vaporwave, as well as his journey becoming a music producer, professional one, which is pretty awesome. He does have a crates going on for his album Reincarnated Resurrection, as well as he's trying to get an apprenticeship with a local music producing studio. And part of that is he has an Indiegogo going on, so you can help him go through this apprenticeship. It does cost a little bit of money, about $10K, I believe. And that'd be awesome if you guys could support that. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. Without further ado, let's get into the show. Welcome to Music's the Hang Up. This is Kite0080. We've got Kira Yoshi on the show. He's well, actually, first up, what would you call your music? Is it Vaporwave?
Yeah, I would say it's Vaporwave. I've used the tag alternative Vaporwave, so that could work. Well, I guess alternative Vaporwave is just expanding on the sound and not depending so much on the classic Vaporwave sound.
Well, yeah, starting off though, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, my name is Derek Power, and I currently reside in Framingham, just 20 miles west of Boston, Massachusetts. And I make and release music as Kira Yoshi. I used to make music as the Spangle Maker starting in 2006 before taking a music hiatus around 2011. But no matter what it is, the music I make in the end is informed by what I like, what I have, what I can do, and what I would like to do. So.
And how'd you come up with the name Kira Yoshi and get into the Vaporwave scene?
So as I was getting into the music and even thinking about joining the scene as an artist, I was revisiting Star Trek Deep Space Nine. During the course of that program, Miles and Keiko O'Brien have a second child whom they named Kira Yoshi. And I looked at the name and I thought, this actually makes a good Vaporwave artist name. But then as I thought about it more, I really liked the idea of using that name because A, it actually looked good in katakana. Yeah. B, I liked the openness and ambiguity of it, and it's not just the fact that you have to read it in Japanese. And then finally, C, the most important part was the name was available on Bandcamp.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so how did you get into the Vaporwave scene then?
I started listening to Vaporwave directly in late 2017, and getting there involved a series of random events spread out over years, like seeing some of the needle drop reviews, like Rain Temple and Pharma, for instance, and also Floral Shop. Hearing songs like St. Pepsi's Enjoy Yourself and Blank Banshee's Ammonia Clouds. So finally I started listening to the music exclusively, and as I was listening to it, I was impressed by the breadth of sound as well as the depth of talent that the scene had. I personally love electronic music for as long as I can remember, whether it was listening to whatever synth pop was coming out of MTV in the 80s, listening to Vangelis, whom I consider a musical father figure, or being a fan of Warp Records since the 2000s. So really, I could tell this was a scene that had everything I love about music and electronic music in particular. But what really convinced me to join it was this unapologetic creative drive that I could sense from these artists. There was no inhibition, no hesitancy, and no fear. Furthermore, I knew that I could make something that not only would fit in the scene, but could also expand its possibilities. So I don't have to sound like a second insert favorite Vaporwave artist here. I could make music as myself, even adopting a Japanese name.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And that actually, the way you just described all that kind of bleeds into my next question about what is Vaporwave to you?
Funny enough, I personally prefer to call it Vapor because to me it's much broader, and it also takes into account all the different offshoots like Future Funk or Vapor Trap or anything with vapor in it. And also, whenever I write it down, I use the British spelling because I always liked British spelling. Blame it on reading lyric sheets from those kind of artists. I think of it as an art movement more than anything else. It's a movement that makes art built on mood. And it's all done with a kind of DIY and DJF attitude. What I mean by built on mood is that the fundamental core of whatever is being made, whether it's music or visuals, it's all based on mood, and then everything else is built on top of that. Here, it's incredibly open. So if you want to do a 2-minute future funk banger, or a 6-minute hypnagogic ambient pop piece, or a 30-minute noise drone piece, or anything in between, you can do that because at its core, it's mood. The mood itself can be also anything, whether it be nostalgia or a longing to be somewhere else, somewhen else, or even something else, or just a general feeling. So basically, to sum it all up, I think that Vapor has maximum creative freedom for the artist and maximum creative results for the listener. And as long as that drive is maintained, Vaporwave will never be dead.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's pretty cool. Speaking of like the aesthetics and all that behind it, I actually have a folder on my computer called Inspiration for like, especially for this podcast, whenever I'm trying to do like the background animations and all that stuff. And your album, Reincarnated Resurrection, that album art like really inspired me. So it's funny that you're saying that, and even before we had the idea of having this interview, you're already inspiring me before I even had a chance to listen to your music.
Oh, thank you. I'm really touched.
Speaking of that album, Reincarnated Resurrection, it's now on crates for funding until August 31st. I reached out to one of our Patreon supporters who actually really liked that album, Shadab Hassan, and he had this question. So, on that album, the last track, Tears Are Rivers and Rivers Are Tears, is actually in Nepali. It's the longest track on the album. What's like the inspiration behind this? Because it has like this very powerful mood, and for him, it invokes feeling of longing for something or someone. And he was just interested in what that was about.
Wow. Well, first off, thank you, Shadab, for the very kind words as well as for the question. So that whole album, Reincarnated Resurrection, consists mostly of material that has existed for a long time, just waiting to be released. When I decided to start making music as Kira Yoshi, I took stock with what I had already made, picked the ones that I thought were the strongest, and then filled in the rest when needed. Hence the album title. So Tears Are Rivers and Rivers Are Tears was one of those pre-2018 works. In fact, it was recorded all the way back in March 2010. It began one day with finding this sound in my Roland Phantom X8, one of the many hardware instruments I have. I liked what I was instantly coming up with in that sound, with a general idea about what I would be doing. I would hit record and just play for as long as I could keep playing. And for what ended up being 18 or so minutes, I was in that magical place where it was just me and the music and nothing else. And looking back on it, it's very clear I was making this in a meditative state, and something I like to do again in the future. And it also reflected a time where I was going through a personal low, and so there was definitely an element of catharsis. But I'm also glad that even when going through that, I was still able to make something that was both beautiful and meaningful.
Yeah, and that is a completely different sound from the rest of the album. For people who haven't listened to this album yet, what's like one track that they should check out?
The one I tend to promote the most is No Promises in the Wind, and the language used is Basque, actually. And it's for a couple reasons. One, Petri Dish is featured onto it, where he uses his Vocaloid. And actually, I knew him before he started making music as Petri Dish. So it was great that he was involved in that. And then the other was, I made it before SoundCloud rap was a thing. I was kind of hoping to make something that had a hip-hop vibe, but also could venture into ambient. So that was the initial attempt of making it at the time. But in the end, I just really like the groove and the feel of it. So
yeah, that sounds really cool, and I'll definitely put a link for everyone to check that out in the show notes. You can catch that album on his Bandcamp, as well as until August 31st. This is on crates for funding for vinyl. Anything else you want to shout out about that?
I really like to see this happen, because I think it'd be really cool to have my music onto wax. How I started listening to music was through records, and so to have that on there would just be a nice dream come true.
You recently announced that you're going to be taking a little bit of a break on your new music production to take up a recording studio apprenticeship. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I know. It's funny with all the talk about coming back into music making. I finally put it on the back burner. But one of the reasons is that I'm pursuing this apprenticeship over at Plaid Dog Recording, and it's a recording studio in Boston. It's just the chance to build a professional portfolio in an area where I actually want to be a professional. Because right now my day job has absolutely nothing to do with music at all, and I'm hoping that between this opportunity plus working on an upcoming MBA and even making music as Kirayoshi would orient me towards the career I've always wanted. And so therefore those things will take up a lot of time, if not all of it.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm kind of putting it on the back burner.
For people who like maybe are thinking, maybe they're in high school right now and they're saying, I want to get into music, and maybe music production is my thing, or producing music, like what kind of advice would you have for them?
Definitely listen to as much music as you can and as many different styles as you can, because the more you listen to, the more patterns you soak in and the more ideas you have about how you want to do your own music. So definitely listen to as much music as you can. And then as far as making it, you just, you find what tools you can scrounge up and just learn how to use the tools. There's plenty of tutorials on YouTube that are very helpful. There's also lots of books and courses out there that you can use as well, and just absorb as much information as you can and try things out yourself. And don't be afraid to just try anything. And, obviously follow people's recommendations on how to record and mix stuff, but also don't be afraid to try something else, because sometimes you can come up with something really interesting and that can help define your style. So,
yeah, for sure. So yeah, we're starting to wrap it up here. Do you have any closing words or anything you want to plug before we end the show?
So the apprenticeship I'm pursuing is actually going to get crowdfunded through Indiegogo. So if you want to help out with that, and it should be up and running by the time this gets out. So just look for Derek Power's audio career. There's going to be some really cool perks to come with it as well. So especially if you're an artist, one of the perks is being able to record at the studio where I will be apprenticing at. And then another perk is I can actually mix your material in my apartment studio.
So yeah, I'll put a link to all that in the show notes so you guys could check that out and check out that Indiegogo project. Cool, man. Is there anything else you want to say?
You can follow me on Facebook and Twitter. I make regular announcements there, and so you can follow me in my various pursuits and all that. So
yeah, cool. And we definitely want to stay up to date on your journey. It sounds like you have a bright future with apprenticeships and the skill sets that you're coming together. Definitely someone that I think people want to know if they're interested in getting their music mastered and all this kind of thing. So congratulations and good luck on the future outcomes, man.
Thank you. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, great interview. I think he has a great insight, very interesting thoughts on vapor, which maybe I'm going to start calling it vapor as well. I kind of like that idea. Maybe not the British spelling, but yeah, great episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this and learned a little bit more about him, as well as some interesting information about if you're interested in becoming a music producer. Definitely check out that Crates that we talked about, as well as his Indiegogo. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. If you're not already following him, you can also catch him out on Twitter and SoundCloud and everywhere else. So I'll put a link to all that. If you're not following me, we're on Instagram and Twitter. I do daily news and weekly news, as well as these interviews, to just let you stay up to date and you never miss an episode. If you're not already, and you might be interested in supporting me, we do have a Patreon, and here goes our Patreon supporters are here. So thank you guys very much for supporting the show. I super appreciate it. I'm Kite0080.